I made my first trip back to New York City in nearly 2 years for the 2021 US Open Championship. I got the chance to photograph tennis at the highest level, but most importantly, I got to get my hands on the brand new Canon R3. So what did I think of it? Let's gear up and let's get started. Hey there you guys, I am Jerry Lai and welcome back to my sports photography channel. For those of you joining me for the very first time, I have been fortunate enough to have worked as a photojournalist for the past 17 years. And my goal for the channel is to help you become a better sports photographer. If you think that I could help you out, hit the like button and subscribe. Now, before I dive into the contents of today's video, I think it's very important to mention that I am actually both a Canon and a Sony user. However, I'm not sponsored or paid by either manufacturer, so any opinions on the gear that I share in this video do not reflect those of either of those manufacturers or of my employer. And now with that important disclaimer out of the way, let's get on with the video. Once again, I was very lucky to get some hands-on time with the brand new Canon R3 at the US Open Tennis Championships in New York City. Now, I am sorry to report and sorry to disappoint that I am unable to share actual images that I took with this camera. The model that I had in hand at the US Open was a pre-production model with a pre-production sensor. So I've been told that the image quality will not be quite the same as what is released in the coming weeks. However, all the other guts and electronics in it were the real deal. And I can more accurately speak to how those operated in the field. First off, let's talk about the key specs of this camera. The new Canon R3 features a 24 megapixel sensor and can capture 30 frames per second with its electronic shutter. Now I think that 24 megapixels is going to surprise and potentially disappoint a lot of users and fans out there. And that's because arguably their biggest competition, the Sony Alpha 1, features a 50 megapixel sensor with an identical 30 frames per second. So on paper, it's a little bit hard to believe that Canon would come out with something that's only 24 megapixels. And that's also especially considering that Canon does make the R5 mirrorless camera, which generates a 45 megapixel file. Now, Canon claims that pros don't really want or need more megapixels, and that the smaller file sizes are better for their workflow and generate better image quality. However, skeptics like Tony Northrup will say that a 24 megapixel file is a result of simply not being able to match the Sony Alpha 1 specs. I'm sure the truth is somewhere in between. Regardless, Canon did deliver on a number of features that us pros have asked for in a flagship mirrorless body. Namely, number one, solid build quality. It's the same quality that you know in the 1D series. Number two, a wide array of built-in communications features, such as wireless transmitting and 5G tethering. And three, and probably most importantly, they delivered robust and reliable autofocus tracking. All these features are awesome, but it's the autofocus tracking that really got me interested. Now, I will admit, recently, camera manufacturers have been on a kick of getting somewhat gimmicky with their AF features, such as eye and face detect and tracking. Yes, these do work and can be effective for some things like portraits or slower moving sports, but it's not something that sports photographers have switched to for fast moving action. The technology hasn't been quite there yet. So truth be told, when I first heard about this eye autofocus system, I was rightfully skeptical. When you pick up an R3, there is a color dot that moves around with your eye. If you look to the left, the cursor moves left. If you look right, the cursor moves right. Okay, so that's a very nifty trick, but I'm already thinking to myself when I was handed the camera, how the heck do I turn this thing off? But here is the rub. Trust the camera and it will revolutionize the way you shoot sports, or quite frankly, anything else. Because with the R3 and its new autofocus system in the hands of a skilled operator, You're no longer worrying about putting a center dot on your subject and cropping a photo in post-processing. With the R3, you can select your focus point with your eye through the viewfinder. And the amazing thing is, once you've selected it, it is very, very sticky and will follow your subject in the frame. It's really hard to describe until you see it for yourself, but this is extremely useful for composing a logo or background in your photograph. Frame up the photo how you wish and let the action flow around throughout your frame. This type of tracking actually already exists in the R5. I'm actually not sure why no one really talks about this, but it's just not as sticky or as refined as the R3. Now, once again, I'm not allowed to show photos from a pre-production camera, so the best way to illustrate exactly how sticky the autofocus system is in this new R3 is to just give you some stats. I shot one whole changeover to test the accuracy of the autofocus tracking in the Canon R3. I would let the player drift left, I would let the player drift right, I would intentionally let that net cord get in the way and chop that head off, and see how the camera performed. I would also intentionally frame the player off-center and use different focus points and different focus areas. And after that one changeover, I ended up taking 642 frames. I individually counted up the out-of-focus images in those frames and got 49 of them. So for those of you counting at home, that is a 92% in-focus keeper rate. 92%. So do I trust this camera? Yeah, I think I trust it. And once you understand that you can trust the camera to this level, you can now frame your shot in camera as opposed to just trying to maintain a focus dot on the center of your target. And this just absolutely smashes the way I've been shooting sports for my entire career. And truth be told, with only 90 minutes of total time with the Canon R3, I was actually having a very hard time adapting and need a lot more practice. You see, with this new style of shooting, I was cutting off a number of limbs and heads when players would reach up or jump out of my frame because I was trying to maintain a certain background element, like the tournament logo. Obviously, my skills would improve with some time and practice, but I could already tell in this short amount of time, this will really revolutionize the way some very skilled operators will shoot. Once again, with this autofocus system, the photographer is now focusing on composing and utilizing their full frame instead of just trying to point a dot at a target. There is also an additional benefit in that this autofocus system is great at working around obstructions. Using tennis as an example, the net cord is something that will often throw off the single point center dot focus method. But with the eye autofocus and the absolute stickiness of the head and people tracking, the net cord was no longer really a problem for me. The camera would keep tracking a player despite obstructions from the net, ball boys, or other cameras that creep into my frame. Now, of course, Canon is not stupid. They know that at the end of the day, this is very fancy tech, and quite frankly, a lot of photographers are not going to care to try to learn this new system. Or even those that do learn it won't always activate it in every situation. Fortunately, all this fancy eye autofocus and people detection can be turned off, and you can return to your tried and true single point select autofocus. And it will still be the best Canon camera ever produced. But again, in the hands of a very skilled and creative operator, the possibilities with R3 are just mind-blowing. So those are my very initial thoughts on the Canon R3 and my very limited hands-on time with it at the US Open Tennis Championships. This camera was finally officially announced and shipping will begin soon. So once it does, I do hope to get my hands on it so that I can get some more deeper real-world testing with this camera. For me personally, it was actually very hard for me to go back to using the 1DX Mark III at the tournament, and so I ended up using the R5's eye, head, and people detect feature to try to simulate what the R3 can do during the rest of my time in New York City. Anyways, if you do have some questions about my very limited time with the R3, leave a comment in the section below. I'll do my best to answer what I can. Thank you very much as always for watching today. If you enjoyed the content of this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button and subscribed. Don't forget to also ring that notification bell so that you can be alerted as to when new videos come out. I try to publish new videos every few weeks, so I will see you all again next time. Stay safe, happy shooting, and take care. Bye now.